Troy to turn on our mic. And it's usually a problem I have. It's about every week. Yeah. And so this morning's plan is to go into the book of Philippians, the last of the prison epistles in our. So I should have, in retrospect, I could have called this class Journey Through the Prison Epistles. And that would have been sufficient. But so the plan is to do that. We'll get into some thoughts in Philippians today. And, we'll see how we do. And, we may continue maybe and finish it next week, or we may finish it this week. Who knows? But the plan, though, is when we're done, then, I'm getting an introduction to Hebrews going. And so when we're done with this, we're going to go into Hebrews. So I would like to suggest that you read the book of Hebrews, maybe a chapter a day. You don't have to read the whole thing, but I just suggest you read it however you want to attack that, and you will get much more out of the class. And I like questions. And so if you read it, the more familiar you are with it, the more questions you're going to have. And so that's what we want. Okay, so I'll just throw that out there for you. And we're going to ask Troy, if you would, lead us in prayer this morning. Thank you.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we come to you at this time, Lord, just thank you for this opportunity once again to gather together, to look into your word. And this morning, look into Philippians. We just pray, Lord, that you would be with each and every one of us here and help us to open our minds and be with Darrell and guide him as he directs this study. And we just pray that we would be the Bible students that you would have us to be, and that we can apply these things to our lives.
Yes.
Mindful of those who are unable to be here, we just continue to pray for them and pray that you would just pray that you be with us now. We pray these things in your son's name.
Amen. All right. Very good. Thank you, Troy. Okay, so thoughts on the prison epistles. That could have been our class. We had this ambition, whole New Testament thing. That's not going to happen. So this morning, then, we're going to be in Philippians, which we're calling Joy in Chains. Okay, Joy in Chains. If I had put happiness in chains, how would that have worked? Happiness in chains? Probably not. No, we wouldn't be happy about being in chains. I doubt that Paul and Silas, when they were in prison in Philippi, having been beaten and put in the stocks, were happy, but yet they were singing. Where'd that singing come from, right? So joy is a much different thing. And I really love the book of Philippians for the theme that permeates the book, which is that theme of joy. What did I write down here? I think joy 5 times and rejoice 10 times we find in there, something like that. So anyway, we're going to go through about 62 AD. Paul wrote this book, and so we're going to, as we've done with the other books, we're just going to put up point by point a basic outline and talk about things within those parameters, and see what we can glean from the study. Okay, so the first 11 verses are the introduction to the book. Now, one of the things about Philippians, it's if you compare it to, or if you compare this group of Christians to the Corinthians, for instance, in Corinth, one problem after the other, right? Just one issue that Paul had to deal with, or or that he dealt with them. With the Philippians, it was a Roman colony. It was populated by pretty disciplined kinds of people, and he didn't have any problems with them that we know. In fact, pretty much everything he says in here is positive with regard to them. And so it's a breath of fresh air, in comparison with some problems that he had to deal with other groups of people. So pretty problem free. So if you notice, as he opens the book in verse 3, I thank my God in all my remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine for you all, making my prayer with joy. Always with joy. That's a great thing. As opposed to the Corinthians, I cannot speak to you as to spiritual men, but as to men of flesh, as to babes in Christ, right? Just the very opposite of that. And so here we start out with the joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. I am sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Christ. So he's sure, he's got confidence in them that God will bring them safely through all the way to the end. Okay? And so why is he so confident? Why is he so confident in them? Are there any indications that they're fighting against God? No, they're not reluctant. They're not fighting against him. They're in full cooperation, participation, fellowship with God, and they are going well. Okay? They are running well. So there's a lot for us to individually emulate, with the people that make up this congregation. And so in verse 11, verse 10, so that you may approve what is excellent, and so be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Christ to the glory and praise of God. Okay. So this is a very positive. So to the glory and praise of God. So I want to talk about that for a moment. Discuss that for a moment. Okay. You have a group of people here that are doing very well. Have these people ever sinned? Okay. They have sinned and fall short of the grace of God. And God apparently allows us to do that. He allows us to go into that darkness, because he says all have sinned, and even if, people, with our kids, we want to save them from that, right? We don't want them to do that, but nobody escapes that, nobody, everybody slides into that darkness. But how is God glorified in all this? So the Philippians, living their lives to the glory and praise of God, what glorifies him? So we fall into darkness. So how is God glorified? Yeah. That's right. That's right. So we're allowed to go into that darkness, and he is glorified when he brings us out of it. He calls us, right, out of darkness, because we all go into darkness. We, at some point in our lives, every there are no exceptions to this. Everybody goes into that darkness. Okay? It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter who your parents are. Everybody sins and falls short of the glory of God. But then he's glorified when he calls and we answer. That makes sense? Okay. And so the Philippians, even though it's so positive, the book, right, the things that he says about them, they have glorified God by their response to the gospel. Yeah, Chris?
Philippians, almost more than any book, not quite, but it's a collective conversation. It is not an individual. We are so individualistic in our society today, in the way we operate with our spiritual life, that I think we miss the collective conversation that Paul's having here. He's not talking about one person who's sinned. He's talking about this collective body in unity, with humility, operating to the glory of God.
Yep.
And that's the focus. So I think, and not that it's not good to personalize these things, but again, there's a richness that comes from us understanding how we, as a local congregation, like the Philippians, as a congregation of God's people, are in operation and in unison and working together for the glory of God.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So in verses 12 through 26, then Paul's going to be talking about his personal circumstances at Rome that he'll enumerate here. Okay. In verse 12, he says, I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel, right? So we talk about his joy in chains, but if there is no purpose perceived, if we suffer some way, if there's no purpose, does that make a difference in how we are going to respond to that? You know, so he says that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel, so that it has become known, the gospel, throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest, that my imprisonment is for Christ. So he's in prison. Roman prisons are not described as very, being facetious, very pleasant places, filthy, hot, underground, guards that, and I don't know how, I don't know how Paul was treated, but guards were not known to be kind, right? And so this is a very tough circumstance. But what is he doing here? People know that he's there for Christ. There's purpose, right? Okay. There's purpose in what he's going through, and that makes all the difference. There's one thing we can say about Christians as we go through this life is that we have a sense of purpose, no matter what we do, what we suffer, what we sacrifice. Everything has a purpose, right? Okay, so in verse 14, and most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. How would they be emboldened by his imprisonment? Yeah, you would.
You think that they would say, okay, that's what happens when you preach.
Yeah, I don't want no part of it, right? So these brethren are obviously committed. You know, they're all the way in. And so think about things, you know, in your own life or in your own experiences where someone is, because he's not feeling sorry for himself. He's already made it known, hey, people in this prison know why I'm here. And it's advancing the gospel. It's it's beneficial with regard to the gospel. And so he's got an attitude in his afflictions, in his chains, in his imprisonment that serves as an example. I mean, I think about myself, if I am out here preaching and one of the brethren's arrested and for preaching the gospel and he's in jail and he's making use, you know, Leah, and then.
Well, couldn't it be that maybe these particular Christians, we remember him before he was a Christian, and so they were kind of scared of him still, and now that he's in prison because he's preaching the gospel, to me, that would make me feel, okay, he's truly
Yeah.
preaching God, he's being punished for it, and so it now is encouraging them
Yeah.
that we're not afraid of him anymore, you know.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, he is now willing to.
So they can see that he's
Yeah.
for Christ.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, good point. Yeah, Lisa.
I was thinking about when I see people who I love, who I know go through hard times and they stand up for Christ, it makes me think about how I would handle that situation, and like makes me examine myself in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it gives me more having to have the process of walking through those steps in my head. If it were to happen to me, what would I do? It makes it easier, I think, to stand firm,
Mm-hmm.
firm thought through.
Sure.
Seeing Paul go through that, they would think, could I do that? I could do that, you know?
Yeah. Because if they're being more bold, I mean, boldness seems to imply that there's some kind of risk involved, but they're not being controlled by it, right? They're not being controlled by fear. And Paul was a perfect example of that. He's in the circumstance and he's using it. Yeah, really good. Good points. Yeah, Craig?
You know, I just think, you know, yes, in our personal lives, and for me, I'm just impressed when you see somebody that just stands up for what's right, despite what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it encourages me.
Yeah.
Like Lisa said, you know, they're going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's great. Yeah, that's great. And, you know, and I think about how, you know, as we see people that we know in Christ that over the years and people get old and they pass away and whatever they go through, you know, as I look at my life and look forward, and maybe you do the same, as I think about those people and how they stayed faithful no matter what they were suffering all the way to the end. And when I don't know what my future looks like, and we don't know, but whatever it is, I know I can make it, and I know I can stay faithful no matter what, because I have all these examples of people who did that, you know. So it is inspiring, isn't it, to see someone, this situation, I guess I should say, to make it simpler, was really an inspiration to the people who witnessed it. Okay, that's great. Good thoughts, you guys. So he must have had a good attitude, a superior attitude there in that cell, and it says a lot about him. Okay, and as Leah pointed out, it was saying something about him to people who knew his history. Okay, that's really good. Yeah, Todd.
Wasn't Paul under more of a house arrest thing during this imprisonment?
Yeah, you got a point. So maybe he wasn't in a dungeon.
Yeah, it was the second imprisonment he was.
Yeah.
But I thought he was like under house arrest.
Yeah.
Having friends come to visit him, and he's basically converted the entire
Yeah, yeah.
He's pretty busy, so I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe that's where he is physically encouraged.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Very good. Verses 15, this is interesting in 15 through 18. Some indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry, but others from goodwill. The latter do it out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. So they know why he's there. You know. The former proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition. So there's something that these ones are seeking to gain by preaching Christ, but it's not being done out of love, which I would say love for God, love for their fellow man, but for some selfish end. He says, not sincerely. Okay. So when people look at them and hear them, what they're seeing and hearing is not the truth. This is not really what this person is after. This is not really the kind of person this is, but thinking to afflict me in my imprisonment. Okay. So what is the ambition? What do we see, with false teachers in Paul's experience, trying to diminish his influence and get a following in order to take advantage of people? Okay. It seems real foreign, the thought, but it's not, it's not unheard of in our day, is it? That people preach to get a following, to take advantage of people, to get people's money, whatever it may be. And so this is not a new thing. It's been going on, but it's just an interesting mindset here that these individuals have, preaching, to gain a following. But he says, what then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice. Okay. Whatever their motives are, okay, if Christ is being preached, okay, he says, I rejoice in that. So what about the preachers who are preaching out of pretense? Okay. What about them? Where are they headed? If they don't, okay. So they're going to preach to others, like Paul said in 1 Corinthians 9, that he was avoiding preaching to others, and then they're going to find themselves disqualified. Okay. Okay. So, yeah.
It's not an endorsement of the conduct, but a reveling in the outcome.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So that's now, there's no, understand they were preaching the truth, right? Even though he says in continuing in truth, but that's a different thread. They weren't preaching an adulterated gospel at this point. They were
Right.
preaching the gospel, they were just doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And this is where that collective comes in. Collectively, Christ is the benefactor, even though individually, those people are going to have to answer for
Right.
conduct.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and so he says here in this, I rejoice. In verse, what is that? Verse 18. Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice. And then he says, yes, and I will rejoice. So twice in that verse, he says, I will rejoice. I will have joy. Okay, that the gospel is being preached. Okay. And so that's, it makes me think of Nehemiah 8:10. Anybody know what Nehemiah 8:10? The joy, the joy of the Lord is your strength. Okay, so whatever the circumstances Paul is in, he is a prisoner, and he is proclaiming the gospel. He is changing people's perceptions. He is using that situation for the betterment of the gospel. And in the midst of it, he is rejoicing. So my question as I read it is there a connection between Paul saying, I will rejoice, the joy that he harbors and the strength that he demonstrates in his circumstance? Is the joy of the Lord contributing to his strength? Okay. Do you have that experience? I mean, do you face anything in life that requires strength? Right. And so does the joy, I would say, that comes from the Lord, it's a fruit of the Spirit, right? So that's from the Spirit. Okay. And so how does that manifest in your life? Okay. So, that strength, again, implies that there's some kind of resistance in whatever form that may be, and we need strength. But that strength is based in the joy of the Lord. It doesn't have to do with the circumstance. Okay. Yeah.
When you're going through something difficult, and you can really see God in it, and see help, and see
Okay.
protection, attitude here, that is joy, very joy producing.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be able to, even though maybe I didn't even respond appropriately at first or whatever, and I think about what God would have me do, and He's like, I need to move on here and have a better attitude, or I can see you really brought me this. That's very joy producing.
Yeah. Sure.
Whatever it is.
Okay. Yeah, it is. It makes you realize that he is caring for you, as Peter said in 1 Peter 5:6. We don't have to worry. We don't have to be anxious. He cares for us. And when you see that happening in your life, isn't that wonderful? And there's happiness that comes with that, but there's a joy. For me, I like to realize that whatever the circumstance I'm in, that it's so temporary. That's a big thing with me. It's just temporary. And as in 2 Corinthians 4, we look not at the things which are seen. So I know that no matter what it is, that in the blink of an eye, I'm going to be somewhere that's not here. Okay. Right? That's a promise of God. I know that's going to occur, and it's not going to be very long. And it's really not long for anybody. It just seems like it when you're younger. Right? But I know no matter what, none of it's going to matter a bit very shortly. So as I've said before, you take life seriously, but not so seriously that it makes you miserable. We don't have to do that because we know, right, that we have a better life. We know we have an abiding hope, a living hope that puts it kind of colors the things that happen in life. And so when Paul talks about so much joy throughout the book, that joy is based on a lot of things. So just curious about your own life. What brings you joy as a Christian? You don't have to tell me. But I think it's a good thing to contemplate, because there's, I mean, what's the opposite, do you think? I mean, what would be its opposite? If I'm strengthened by joy, what would be the thing that takes away my strength? What would that be? What do you think?
Worry, fear, anger.
Worry, fear, anger.
Life.
Life. Oh man. Okay. Okay. Yeah. 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 And life is full of challenges, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. It's full of challenges. So I like the eternal perspective that God teaches us to have. Okay. It's not focused here. It's focused beyond here, So to have that privilege of being able to look beyond the challenges, to the sure hope that we have, that's a wonderful thing. Absolutely. Good stuff, you guys. Yeah.
I agree with you what you're saying, because this past, during the summer, I spent
Oh, yeah.
5 weeks with Dad.
Yeah.
I tell you, that mentality of looking ahead and hoping for the future and knowing that this is not going to last really helps.
Yeah.
But it's hard when I wasn't the one going through the troubles, I saw my dad.
Yeah.
And I guess that's hard. I mean, it's easy for me, but what do you do with that person that's struggling?
Yeah. 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 It's a helpless feeling, isn't it? Yeah, it's a helpless feeling. So if you or I were in his place, what would we want? What would we want? Okay. We would want people that we love to be with us, because we can't change it. We wish we could change it, but we can't change it. We feel helpless, right? But I know that's what I would want. I would want people that love me to be with me, to be there for me. Yeah. And so if we can give that to someone, that's a wonderful gift. That's a wonderful gift. And it's wonderful that you and whoever else in your family were able to, be able to be there with him. How's he doing?
Oh, I'm happy now in the future, right?
Yeah.
Then,
Uh-huh.
Because he's better. He's
Good.
high working.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, we're going to experience troubles like that.
Yeah.
And so what do we do? How to comfort that person?
Yeah. Yeah. Be there.
One day it's going to be me, right? So how do I get through that? It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris, do you have something?
When Paul's in his afflictions needed his brothers and sisters in Christ. He needed them to be there. That's, I think, the point about house arrest, right? Timothy's penning this probably, right? Or one of his communities, probably Timothy. There are people with him supporting him. So the very thing that your dad needed is the very thing that he provided.
That's right.
Just in the same way that Paul was provided that by people who love him. So that's you were a blessing and are a blessing to your father from God.
Yeah.
I tell you, the people around, the church members, those who kind of called my dad, those who took him to the hospital even though I was gone. I mean, I don't know what we would have done without those two, the elder and this other gentleman from church that supported dad through that time. But, and hearing from others, like Chris says, when I saw a text from Lisa or a text from Tony, that just lifted me.
Yeah.
And your email. So was nice and your poor story.
Mhm.
And Jackie, I love her. But I do agree. I mean, you have to help each other.
That's right. That's right. And that's what we can do. That's under our control. See? So the things that are not under our control, they're just not, right? And so we don't, I mean, we can wish and we can diminish our own strength and ability to give by wasting our energy and, in being anxious or over things we can't control. We can't control it. So, but what can we control? We can be there for each other. So, thank you for sharing that, Desi. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. We need to consider these things because,
I also, I'd like to mention the power of his resurrection.
mm-hmm,
That is the hope of glory.
mm-hmm,
Like chapter 3:10 said that I know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his suffering, being conformed to his death, that by any means I may attend to the resurrection from the dead.
mm-hmm.
I think that's, to me, the real source of God's joy and the strength that for his suffering, and that through him that provide encouragement
Yeah.
to the people who can see him,
Mm-hmm.
but also the same thing for us.
Yeah. So absolutely, we have these precious and magnificent promises, right? And we get a lot of strength from those. I mean, what would we do without those promises, right? And one of the things, we feel for people when they have to suffer alone. We really feel for people that, and so it's a wonderful thing, that he has a family and people with him. Yeah. Notice in verses 21 and 22, for to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. For if I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me. Yet which I should choose, I cannot tell. Okay. I don't know which one, like that one. We don't know which one to choose. Do you feel like that? Just because this really applies to everybody. You think of 1 Corinthians 15:58. Be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your toil is not in vain. Do you have more to do for the Lord in your life? I think about this and I think, well, if the Lord appeared to me in a vision and I knew it was him and he said, Daryl, there's a button right here. Okay. Now you push this button and we'll just, okay, you're all done. We're just going to head off and, or you cannot push the button and keep preaching and teaching and influencing people for me. What do you think? I mean, so that's just kind of a way to bring it, nothing wrong with going and being with the Lord at all, right? But do you feel that you have more to do while you're here for him? Do we have more as a congregation? do we have more to do for him? Okay. Yeah, Tony?
What really shows you the attitude is so different from, say, a Christian who hasn't matured to the point where they feel the purpose and feel the work that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Because there'd be no question if all his life was keeping some rules and not doing certain things, pleasurable things you don't get to do, that you'd want to just push that up. But Paul had that battle in him because he had such direction and knew that what he did made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So as Christians, we need to get to that point too, that we're working and we know we're making a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's not necessarily, out traveling the world and preaching the gospel like Paul was doing. It's just right in your own congregation, in your own life, whatever your strength is, whatever influence you have. Do you feel a sense of purpose in Christ? That you have a purpose for being here, because you do. Okay? We all do, right? Okay. And so, just a question. Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, this is a hard question for me. I mean, would I be pushing the button because I want to live, because I want to enjoy the things that are in this world, because I want to enjoy all things God gave, or to live for Christ?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hard question, right?
Yeah.
He understood that it was better off for him, given his circumstances, that he would, but given our circumstances, are we wanting to not push the button because we like our circumstances, or because we know there's work left to do?
Mm-hmm.
That is not an easy question.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's very good. That's right. Yeah, because staying involves hardship, right? It's not just staying and having a good time. It's staying and laboring and working. And, the Lord could say, hey, you're coming here anyway. I mean, it's just a matter, it's not like you're going to be here anyway. Just, what do you want to do? So, kind of good. We don't have to kind of make that choice necessarily, Of course, there could be under persecution a circumstance in which a person could compromise and stay here, or not compromise and put their life at risk. That would be kind of that scenario in a way. Okay. All right. So, yeah. Peter?
Most of it that comes to me often is also, am I accomplishing anything for the Lord?
Mm-hmm.
I read all about what I'm supposed to do, but am I doing it?
Yeah.
What are the results?
Mm-hmm.
And as individuals, as congregations, I think that question should be asked frequently,
Mm-hmm.
with sincerity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes you don't know what you're doing. That will influence other people.
That's true.
Like the aged,
Mm-hmm.
and they're still coming, and to them it seems futile, why am I still here? But they're such an example for us.
That's right. Yeah. It doesn't have to be great big things. And he speaks here of fruitful labor, and I understand what Paul means, given his work and what God's called him to do, and he's bearing fruit in what he's doing. Okay. But I just thought about, how do you measure whether you're being fruitful? Okay. Well, I go back to Galatians 5 and, the fruit of the Spirit. Is that fruit in your life? Okay. That's kind of basic, isn't it? Are these things evident in my life? If they are, there are going to be ramifications, things that come from that. Yeah, Tony.
What makes me go back again to the John 15, that if we don't feel fruitful, cling to the vine because he promised.
Mm-hmm.
He'd make it.
That's right.
So just, maybe we're not seeing it, maybe like Kevin said, we're producing a lot, and we just don't even know it. But
Mm-hmm.
the question,
And he's gonna tell us in chapter 3 to continue living by that same standard to which you have attained. So live by what you know. And then the Lord said, whoever has shall more be given. That's his promise. So if we live by the standard we have attained to at this point, okay, I mean, this is really what one day at a time is that we do everything that we're able to do to this point, then that helps us to see beyond, it's just a continual process, okay? That if we're living fully what we understand, then that's going to allow us to look beyond what we currently understand, okay? And then that just continues on. So very good. So let's continue this next week for a bit. And as I said, I'm preparing an introduction to Hebrews, but there's so much here in Philippians, and we have a little bit of time before the quarter changes. So is there anything else before we close? Okay, I want to thank everybody who participated, asked questions and comments. I want to thank you for that. It really makes the class. Appreciate it. And onward and upward. Let's get ready to worship. All right, class dismissed.